Hey, Troy, thank you so much for joining us for this conversation on SRE. And it's tough to find people like you who are actually working as an SRE and who have seen the SRE world at enterprise. We both worked in the same company. Now you are doing it again, in a larger scale, I believe, in another enterprise company. So talk through us, like, what exactly is SRE?
Well, thanks for having me on. I'm super excited. I love this stuff. The first question there is a little bit loaded in what SRE is, but fundamentally, by definition, right, it's applying software engineering principles to solve operational challenges that we have. That's like the textbook answer that you'll see quite a bit online. Yeah. But what I find is that it's easier to talk about what it's not, and it's not just operational support. It's not just catching the pager. It's not just your traditional prod support role where you're keeping something alive and keeping it running alone, right? It's applying engineering practices, making the system more reliable, and all centered around the outcome, which is our customers are happy and our customers are satisfied, and how much reliability do we need to bake into our processes and our software to keep them there, to keep them happy. And it all really starts fundamentally with the customer and making sure, because they don't care if what's under the hood, what cool technology you're using, right? They want to make sure it works, right? No matter where it is, what industry you're in. So that's like the simple of it. It's a depth of a lot of different practices and applying these reliability throughout the full life cycle of software development, really, from the time you plan how something is built to how you build it, and to how you release it and maintain it and monitor it and ensure it's working the way you expect it.
Okay, so it's like bringing your software practices into the operations world. Is that okay to say that? Is it safe to say that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's very software heavy in the sense that, and I think sometimes that's, it's not exclusively what it is, right? There's a lot of parts of it that are not software centric, but a lot of it's cultural and behavioral, and how do we learn from our mistakes, and how do we better ourselves. There's some set of practices and prescriptive kind of techniques that it gives you, but ultimately, yeah, it's when you see a problem, it's like, can I use software to solve this problem, right?
Okay.
That's generally the mindset change. It's being able to put out the toil, put out the unnecessary work and stuff. Simplify away our systems with software.
Okay, great. But how did it all start for you, Troy? I know you were working at Verizon. How did you get into SRE?
So another loaded question, long story. Actually kind of a little bit indirectly, but so fortunately enough, I had an opportunity to work at Verizon. I was in a rotational program there, and my background formally in education was in computer engineering and computer software and stuff like that. And I went a network path. I totally went off the rails right out of the gates out of school. And I went into networking about telecom and building cell sites and that whole domain. And fortunately enough, I was at Verizon, which is an incredibly reliable network, right? That's been their tagline for quite a bit. And in learning how they run their network, which is best in class, right? I found how reliability was handled there, right? We did traffic capacity planning. I did a traffic capacity planning rotation. I was able to do our project implementation. I was able to look at, monitoring our network and how does that work, our incident response to network, our NOC and things like that, how do we manage situations and incidents? And it was all happening, and I didn't know I was doing it, but I was doing kind of a lot of the fundamental parts of operations and SRE. And I always stayed close to software and tried to solve software in the roles I was in when we were doing project management roles and stuff like that, on copper to fiber migrations and things. I would end up writing software to automate my job. Essentially, I would write some software to read in files and tell me where I need to go, do the next program job, or build some geospatial tooling or something like that. And then what ended up happening is I really wanted to get back into more exclusive software development at the company, and then had a really cool opportunity to come in and kind of kickstart our GTS SRE program, and then the intersection, I think, of all of this just was like, yeah, I know SRE. I've been doing it. Like, I got a call and I was like, hey, you interested in this role? And I was like, I don't know exactly what like SRE is. This is a while back now, but I was like, I know the subject. I did a quick Google and I was like, yeah, I do this stuff all the time. I've been doing it for 10 years, right? And then I ended up getting into it, and then I've fallen more and more in love with it because I had a little angst at first because of the misconception that it was going to be some operations job again.
Right.
I didn't want to do that, and then I find that it's not. If you're doing it effectively and correctly, right, you have the opportunity to write software, to fix things, to automate pipelines. Everything is code, infrastructure is code, right? So it's a weird way to get there, but I think I was fortunate enough to be part of, again, learning reliability at the core of what I was doing at Verizon. So.
And you were also at the right team, where you had all the systems that were taking care of whole GTS applications and then monitoring and alerting.
That's awesome. Everything was there. It was great. We had like our pipelining, we had all of our monitoring capabilities and tooling, and was able to like mechanize some of that like right out of the gate, right, and solve problems. And there were roles too in times during the journey where it was like we found that it was like a traveling band of SREs, and we'd just go fight the next battle. Is kind of what it felt like, right? We'd go work on our Jenkins, and we would go work on the next problem, and that was, you look back on it and it's like, yeah, you've been doing it the whole time. It's great. So, yeah, it was a good organization to be part of, and there was an appetite for it, right, from leadership that said like, we need to make sure we know our network is reliable, like, right, how do we make our culture reliable, and how do we make our systems and our IT systems more reliable? So it was good.
Okay, so I'm going to come to that question of the cultural part, because there is still a lot of confusion between the DevOps is also solving the culture, and then what is SRE doing, special that it is entering into the culture part. But before that, why do companies actually need SRE? They already have an operations team. They invest heavily on their infrastructure and then automation and stuff. So where do you think, Troy, this SRE plays this role of helping the system to be stable, or what sort of metrics that SRE, or what problems it is trying to solve in enterprises or in companies?
Yeah, that's a good question, right? It's like you said, you've got operations in place. Everyone's been doing that forever, right? That's not a new thing. I think what it is there's kind of a feeling of like a buildup of like these challenges that are slowing us down, right? The manual processes that involve people. We want to release faster. We want to do it, but there's like a fear of releasing, almost, unfortunately, creeping into the culture of as companies scale and grow. And you want to continue that speed. You want to expedite, how fast you can deliver. And you have to in this world, right? And there's a competing world. I always, every time I pitch and talk about SRE and talk internally, even any place I've ever been, I always show a picture of like a cheetah, like chasing an antelope. And it's like, you don't want to be the antelope. It's kind of like the message that I try to say. And you want to be able to move fast. You can't do that if you've got a parachute running behind you of unreliability that's weighing you down. So it's trying to solve all these things, because we have incidents, we have challenges and problems in our systems, and we know that there's deeper root causes, and we need to bring in a practice like reliability engineering, right, and try to solve for all of that baggage that's behind that's weighing us down, whether it's clunky releases, whether it's lack of observability, excess toil, backup verification, right? How many times are like, oh, we have backups that backups, and you go to restore a backup, and then the backup never works, right? There's a lot of that kind of stuff happening, right? And this practice gives you some prescriptive ways to like solve for that, right? And like an acknowledgement of toil as a problem, as an enemy. A guy I worked with before at Verizon, actually, always used to compare it to like Rage Against the Machine song, like know your enemy, right? Toil is like an enemy of you. It gets in your way. But there's postmortems and how we learn from our incidents, right? How can we like not repeat the same mistake twice? And so these practices, I think to answer your original question, is like, why SRE? Why do enterprise want that? it's to really like solve all this noise, this problem, right? So we can go fast, reliably, and move forward. So I think that's really the big interest. And not for nothing, but there's also just like the natural buzz of the word, right? It's like DevOps was hot for a while, right?
Yeah.
It's still kind of agile, you know. You hit these like big industry sweeping like initiatives that attract a lot of attention. I think almost like sometimes I joke that like DevOps came, right, and then and agile and everything, and everyone wanted to go 100 miles an hour. They're like, yeah, this means we can go fast. They brought a bunch of tools in, and they brought in Jenkins and ruined our lives. I'm just kidding. They brought in all the tools, and then all of a sudden, there was like a kind of like a reality check, a look in the mirror, and says like, well, hold on, like slow down. Like, did we do this reliably, right? And that's where you've got SRE kind of giving you some guiding principles that will help you ensure that you're shipping reliably, building reliably, making your culture reliable, etc.
So what are the key metrics that you would measure in SRE?
Oh, that's there's a lot, right? There's a lot of metrics. You've got your, what it, I guess is like, it's not even nuanced to just SRE, but your service level indicators, your service level objectives, and your service level agreements, right? I think, and your error budgets, which is, I think, arguably most important. You've got those kind of key indicators that the SLIOs that help. And I think that they're a subset of the metrics that we want to look at. But they definitely are kind of table stakes, right? I think people tend to like overcomplicate them and like make it a lot more than it has to be. It's like, we've always had SLAs, contractually agreement with SaaS platforms and other things like that says, you know, and that's the key to an agreement, is it's like contractually binding. There's payback. There's like there's an agreement made. I think most people have really historically had SLOs internally and not knowing they're having them, right? Everyone's already had we need to be at 99.9 or 5 nines or 4 nines or whatever. And the indicators that are there telling us, you know, what we're measuring that objective against. But the introduction of like an error budget and the notion of like how much unreliability can we tolerate, that is the metric. That's the goal. That's the juice. That's the new thing, that I think really provides something that you can mechanize and influence the behaviors a lot.
Yeah, that's awesome, Troy. Learned a lot actually in this question itself.
You use error budgets? You guys have error budgets in your teams?
I cannot say that publicly, but yeah.
Okay. You get them. At a minimum, tell them you need them. But yeah, they're super important. I think because we need a lever that says go fast, go slow, fix problems, bring in features, and it gives us that to say how much unreliability is our customer willing to tolerate. Like in your Facebook or your TikTok or whatever you're using, you know, like if your feed doesn't load and you have to pull down to refresh 5 times, like how many times are you going to have to refresh, or how slow can the video be before you're gonna stop using it, right? And the same thing applies there. So we kind of set the objectives appropriately, and then we know that the inverse of that, 1 minus your objective, gives you kind of the amount of unreliability that your customer is willing to tolerate. And then you use that as a marker to say, okay, well, when this exhausts or when this is 50%, like we need to like stop shipping features, fix the problems, get that reliability growing back up, and then move forward with it. So yeah, it's a really important, powerful kind of metric to start following by. Yeah.
So reliability is the main, I think it's the table stakes, right? In SRE, that's the main metric, I would say. Is that right?
You know, I've gone back and forth on this, like a bunch of times, and you know, sue me, right? I think everyone kind of does. I used to be in the camp of, you know, the metrics are only one little piece of it, which we all agree. But it didn't have to be the only thing. But as I think more and more about it, it gives us an empirical way to measure and kind of like in DevOps. Like in DevOps, one of the key things is measure everything, right? And SRE, again, it's like closely related to DevOps. What it gives us is an opportunity to it gives us an opportunity to really measure everything, right? And to measure the stuff that we're doing. And if you don't measure, how do you know how well you're progressing, right? Like,
Right.
so that's where, if we have a baseline, we have some SLOs at the onset, it gives us a way to just pay attention to our system, know how it's responding and behaving, have like true, like kind of like an objective look at our system from our customer's perspective. And then it gives us a place to work from, right? It helps us identify and give us visibility to like what's going on. So I think it is table stakes. I think it's like something that teams should consider right away. Know your system that you're working on, and use that as a good lever to begin.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Troy. So on the same topic, right? You have very well described about SRE, but how is it different from DevOps? You know, DevOps also has velocity, go fast, and then you also have MTTRs and other metrics that we look in DevOps. But do they like coexist, or like are they competitors? SRE and DevOps.
Yeah. No, that's a good question. That comes up all the time, right? And it's like, well, we have DevOps. Why do we need this, right?
Yeah.
And it's, again, I even kind of what I just mentioned is and I think Liz Fong Jones and others like have talked about the SRE versus DevOps on you know, some of their stuff when she was back at Google. And you know, SRE implements DevOps. And if you think about programming and software development, right? DevOps gives you kind of the basis of like the beliefs, and it's a specific implementation for SRE, and it has a couple extra functions in it when you define a class that are, again, more detailed and oriented, right? You've got postmortem, like conducting postmortems. You've got toil. You've got SLIs, O's, and A's. You've got these like really focused things to achieve the outcome that you're trying, that DevOps is trying to give you, right? So it's just I think they're closely related. I don't think they compete. I think it's just giving us a little bit more guardrails to work against to make sure that our systems, as they grow, right? I think people maybe didn't think about how complicated and how complex things could get like over time, more complex than anything. And as things got more and more complex, like there has to be some more prescription on like, how do we handle these things? Like, how do we manage this scale that's like never ending? How do we handle all this stuff? And how can we apply software to get rid of all this noise so we can go fast, like as we talked about earlier? So I think they're friends. They're not enemies. DevOps.
I think like you said, I've read this I've read this in one of the article. Like you rightly said, I think it is more prescriptive, right? When compared to DevOps, because DevOps is more, sometimes it is generic. You can have different schools of thoughts in DevOps. Some people might say this is important, some people might say this is important, but SRE, you know exactly what you're trying to achieve, end of the day.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely. That's well said. Look, you can start preaching. You gotta, I think you can start spreading the good word. But yeah, that's totally true. And even the things that it prescribes, I mean, just generally for your audience to think about, is like, nothing that we're talking about is like really crazy new. It's just putting these things top of mind and making sure that they're part of the whole life cycle and they're part of the process. And we don't do them as like add-ons. We do them naturally as part of our problem. And I guess what I mean by that is like, you're working on some software, you're releasing a new feature. Okay, think about the things that you need up front, and immediately people go to, okay, the button needs to be red. It needs to do this, it needs to do that. Like, okay, I get the feature, I get the functionality of the feature, but like, okay, does our team need run books to know how to operate this stuff? Does our team need new alerts? Do we need new KPIs? Should we improve our SLO? What documentation do we need for our customers? I get like runbooks internal to stuff. Do we have observability metrics and monitoring around it? Like it's just making sure that these things are part of how we build our stuff, right? That's the thing that I've kind of come to grips with, is this is not new, right? 8 years ago, 10 years ago, when SRE wasn't like a broadly adopted, like well-known thing to the public, people still ran systems, right? They still had monitoring, they still did these things, but a lot of times it just doesn't get prioritized. And I think maybe that's, as we talk about, it's helping me redefine my definition of SRE, right? It's prioritizing reliability almost as well as in that definition and making it part of it. So
okay.
Yeah, this is cool. It's like you're like my psychologist or something. We're like sitting on the couch, talking about this. It's making me think a lot about it. So yeah.
So I think this question, a lot of my audience would love it, because that's where they're more interested. If you are working as a developer currently, SDE, or if you're working as an operational engineer or system administrator, how would you suggest them to get into SRE? Like, what do they have to learn to get into SRE or to apply as an SRE engineer?
Gotcha. So let's use each persona kind of differently, right? If you're a software engineer, you're just a software developer, you can start doing this stuff immediately. You can immediately start doing this. And there's different flavors of SRE. There's embedded teams, there's service teams, but you don't need it. Like, the whole notion of you build it, you own it, which I think is something that gets lofted around quite a bit. Like, that's your opportunity right there, right? When you go to write software, when you're in your sprint planning and you're doing refinement, you need to bring up hey, we need to add some alerting. Hey, we need to update our run books. Hey, we need monitoring. Hey, I think exploring true ownership of what you're building from end to end is a good way to break in, right? So build it, you own it seriously. So if you're a software developer, when you write code and you ship it, go look in your tool of choice, your New Relic, your Prometheus, Grafana stack, whatever your metrics are that are there.
Yeah.
Hopefully they're there. Please tell me they're there. And go look at them. When you ship your new microservice, go look at the monitoring. Look at its behavior, right? It's working. You open the website, you do your thing. It's functionally working. It's out in production. Your customers are using it. Everyone's happy. But how's it performing? How's it behaving? Look at your code. Own your code. Own your stuff that's out there. So from the software developer perspective, I think that's really the key, is just own it and look at how it's behaving, and be part of it after don't abandon it, don't orphan it, don't just ship the code over the wall and it's out, it's done, right? See how it's behaving, see how it's learning, in your own processes, right? As a developer, I think you also have an opportunity in it's a hot topic too, is developer experience, right? What is your developer experience like? Are you using FileZilla to zip your files up and ship them out to somewhere? I hope not. I hope you're using Git. But I joke there. But look for little things that are in your development path that are getting in your way. Add an extra script that automates your developer experience, so you have everything there. Make sure you have readmes for the code that you're writing. Keep those up to date. That's the little stuff. That's the stuff that helps make our systems more reliable as well. When your code breaks, be part of that incident response. Be part of trying to triage and troubleshoot the system that's there, right? Understand that. When you do that, also be part of the postmortem discussion, right? And say, okay, what was the trigger to this? Not just root cause, but what triggered it? How did we find out? Did our customers find out? Oh man, our customers told us about our system breaking. That's not good. What kind of alerts should we put in place? How could we have caught this? What KPIs do we need, right? So it's just getting involved in the ecosystem of it. And for those that are in operations and those kind of roles, I think you said some of your, we were talking before this, and it's find the things that are in your way, operationally, that you're doing, and try to automate them, try to write code to do them, right? And most folks in operations, and not even most, it's really a mixed bag, but there's people in operations that don't have software development experience. Well, that's fine. You don't have to write some crazy code that does it, but educate yourself, learn how to just start writing some code at a minimum. It doesn't have to be a fancy thing. It could be a Python script that you execute, right? But try to automate that stuff away. That's getting in your way, and then simplify. And I think one of the other cool concepts that I was taught a long time ago is SREs kind of build for many, build for one, but build for many. So if you have a problem that you're solving, at your enterprise or at your small startup company, if you're trying to solve a problem, how can I build this solution, whatever it is, to solve everyone's problem that's doing the same thing? That's another mentality that operations folks can have to try to have a bigger impact with the work that they're doing, right? Don't locally solve the problem. Like, think about the problem at a bigger scale. And like, how can I reuse this code for anybody can use this? I think that's one of the biggest things. And I think, I think the folks that are in like in the operations space, apply some of these practices, right? When an incident happens, get everyone together after the incident, talk about what happened. Like, not the people and like, Joe submitted the change and it broke the thing. Like, that's not the focus of the conversation. It's like, okay, if Joe did submit some bad code and the code got through, it's like, talk about, hey, can you add some tests in there to the pipeline so we like don't even release it if it's bad? Or oh, hey, what's our rollback strategy? Like, that way Joe can commit code, and if code gets crazy out there and it breaks things, we can click and roll back quickly. How can we release maybe Joe's code in like bits and pieces, right? How can we do canary or
small iterations?
Yeah, right. Like, right. How can we change that? So do you have a voice, right? I think that's another piece of it. If you're in operations, you have a voice, you have a say in how this can be done better, and bringing that knowledge to the table. Deploying canary is huge. It's huge. It's like, there can't be a fear of releasing, right? If you have a fear of releasing on your team, you're dead before you started. And you should be releasing all the time. and if you notice that you're getting these huge monster releases that you have to support as in operations, and then it's all hands on deck, then how do you slow that? How do you stop that? How do you encourage them to go release more often but smaller, right? That's music to any developer's ears, any product's ears, right? They're always like, yeah, like, great, sounds good, I'll move faster. So I think, I think there's a lot of opportunity out there. Educate yourself first, above all else. Education so important, and it doesn't mean going to school and getting a degree. It means like learning about this material. When you have a problem, how do you solve it better? When you do something, Google it, right? And like, work on like, how could I improve this better? How can I apply software to this challenge? The internet is beautiful now, right? There's so many things out there.
Absolutely. Yeah.
To help with. So yeah, that's a good question. I encourage everybody to have a piece in reliability. That's like, that'd be great. That'd be the best. And if you notice too, I don't even call it SRE really anymore. A guy on my team right now, awesome member of the team. He's like, isn't it just reliability engineering? And it's like, yeah, all it really is, right? It's no site and all that stuff. It gets confusing to people, and they're like, what is site and all that? Then they have that whole conversation. But like, just like, think about things being reliable, be the customer, pretend to be the customer.
Thanks, Troy, for answering that important question. So basically what you're saying is that for a person who has software developer background, that person has to understand, or rather be part of the reliability team, or understand how the reliability works, instead of just shipping the code and forgetting afterwards, and then be part of those discussions and the metrics and SLOs and SLIs. And for the person who is part of the operations team, one important thing I think, which is most commonly asked in my videos, is that do you have to know the scripting? I think which pretty much you have answered that question, because SRE is part of the software practices, or you have to implement software practices. You have to know at least to write the Python code to automate the things or to reduce the toil. So there is no other way around it. Okay.
Right. Yeah. I think you can, like, there's definitely a lot of SRE that you don't have to know how to like write code or software, but it is surely an enabler, right? If you can get rid of the noise and solve those problems. And a good SRE team might have some folks that don't know how to write software, but I would encourage it the more and more time goes on.
Cool. Thank you. And what tools do they have to learn if they want to become a good SRE engineer? Or are there any tools that they have to learn, or what tools that that company uses usually?
Yeah. Well, they definitely need to know how to like get on Zoom and have talks and conversations with people. I think that's the start, right? But because a lot of it is dialogue, it's conversation. I joke about that, but I'm kind of serious. Having conversations and talking is very important. and fundamental. I bring that up first. The other tools, I mentioned some of them earlier, like your monitoring. You've got your application monitoring, you've got logging, you've got the whole monitoring domain, right? Traces, alerting, whatnot. And depending on where you are, right, you're going to have large tooling that's available, some of the major ones out there, or you're going to have your own like open source Prometheus, Grafana stack, something like that running. Those are important tools. There's a lot of automation in infrastructure as code that can be done. Your Terraforms, leveraging your configuration management automation, stuff like Ansible and any of those, right? Those are good tools to know, right? So you can write that automation. Again, that's a good gateway into is like infrastructure as code. We didn't talk about that too much, but like that's a place where those that are not as like software centric can and kind of adapting, because that is software, right? Everything has code. That's an important part. I mean, Git, like understanding Git is, I think, oftentimes overlooked. Like when you're like you understanding how branches work and like what trunk-based development is and why it's better than the other 500 different flavors I've seen. That's an important set of tooling. You've got like I mentioned, like if you're in the cloud, the whole like observability stack of that's available in the cloud is important. Your cloud trails and cloud watches and AWS. Those are important to see how your stuff is behaving and to pay attention to those things. We didn't talk about security that much, but I mean, that's near and dear to you, but that's also really a part of it, your risk management and your vulnerability management. How do you ensure that your stuff can be released quickly? So if in the event there is a vulnerability discovered, that you can quickly release it. How do you have the observability on that? So knowing the tooling that's available there, what you're using for your container vulnerability, any kind of runtime container scanning, those kind of tooling. So it really depends on what domain you're working in and what your application is and what part of the team you're on. There's a whole bunch of tools there at your disposal. That's what DevOps brought us, right? Was every tool known to mankind, right? So that will be there's that's just a few of them. There's a bunch more. I'm sure some people are out there mad that I didn't specify the tool that they're using, but I think what's important is it's not a tool problem for sure, and DevOps isn't a tool problem either.
True.
Sometimes it's masked as a tool problem. All right, bring in all the tools, and then we'll be good to go. But it's not a tool problem. It's architecture and software development and how does this stuff flow and work together that you want to pay attention to. So don't worry about the tool, right? If you know Jenkins, that's fine. Make it happen, make it work. If you know GitLab and pipelines, that can work, that can be effective. If you're using Chef, Puppet, Ansible, pick your flavor, right? It's what outcome are you trying to achieve? And that's what's most important.
So thanks for answering that, Troy. I think that would help a lot of people. So basically what you're saying is you have to, if you're preparing for DevOps, it's pretty much similar like how you're going to prepare for SRE as well. But do you recommend them to read the Google SRE book once before they go for interview? Or
I mean, there's a lot of stuff in there. It's funny how some of it is, it's been around for a while. It's still very true. Some of it is changed a little bit, but I don't think it definitely doesn't hurt to take a look at that. I think the workshop book was very valuable and more practical. Like, how do I get started? Because that's the question people really always have is like, okay, but like, how do I get started, right? We go meet with teams and we're like, how can we get you on with SLOs and stuff like that? And they're like, that's great. I really understand why these are important, but like, how do I actually do this?
Correct.
And that's where you get some examples and some work there. And then for those that are watching that are leading teams perhaps, or trying to bring these practices into place, seeking SRE book. It's got some crazy animal on it. That was a really good one too, in terms of like bringing these practices to light, forming SRE teams, getting started. Has really good it has a whole section on anti-patterns to the team, right? Or to building an SRE team. So that Seeking book is good. The workshop of Seeking, the overall book, the original, the good old original one, is a good book for sure. For anyone that wants to like just learn about this stuff. So
Okay.
It's a lot.
Yeah. I would suggest them to pick the one that you said, the workshop one, and I'll put the link in the description. So
okay, for sure. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So opportunities wise, Troy, how do you think is going to be the future for SRE?
Well, I think what's going to happen, and I'm not a mind reader or be able to look into the future, but I think that you're going to find more of a need for everybody to be part of the reliability experience, right? I think the you build it, you own it, right? It's going to start coming true because the system complexity keeps rising, and there's going to be just a need for these practices. Like it's not going to be a we can be better for our customer. It's going to be like we need to do something because our customer experience is suffering as a consequence to it. So I think you're going to see more developers having to think about these reliability challenges.
Okay.
I think you're going to see more operations folks like getting frustrated with like the complexity and trying to solve the complexity as time goes on. And when you see what's happening, obviously situationally in the world right now, and in the US at least, to like the economy and things that are happening here, there's not gonna be just throw people at the problem. That's not gonna be an option anymore, right? You can't just keep hiring anymore, right? It's gonna be okay, how do we best target what needs to be done first, right? And that's something I didn't even talk about either, is SRE, and when you have your SLOs and stuff out there, you have a good way then to understand where our problems are and where should we focus our energy, because you can't do it all, right? There's going to be a point where you can't do everything, and it's like, what is most important to do? So you're going to need these measures, you're going to need SLOs, you're going to need things to focus you in on what is important for now, and you're also going to hit cost implications, right? When your team's looking for how do I save more money, your enterprise is trying to say, well, we want to be more responsible with what our spend is. It's okay, do we need to have that much extra resiliency built into our stuff? If you notice, we didn't really talk about resiliency much, which is a huge part of reliability. But maybe you don't need that for everything. Maybe everything doesn't need to be active. Maybe everything doesn't need to be geospatially like split across, right? Maybe that's the case. Maybe you can tolerate that downtime,
right?
And I think that's kind of where the field is going to push towards, is using the practices SRE gives us to understand reliability and to make sure we're spending appropriately. What is good enough for the customer? What is just good enough? Just to maintain the customer, to keep the customer happy, give them a good experience, delight our customers, but just enough, not more, not more than they need, because it comes at a cost. It comes at a people cost, a time cost, financial costs, infrastructure costs, for sure.
All right, cool. So now this is going to be the fun question. A lot of people will have. I think they'll understand a lot from this question, I'm sure. So when you're trying to interview people, right, for your team or for any team, as an SRE leader, so what do you look in that candidate when you're trying to select that person, or what are the qualities or technicality or technical stuff or any other things that you look at that they have to learn?
So what might come surprising to most of your audience is your technical depth and competency is not the first thing that I look for. The first thing, and I always joke, is that a good SRE is, and I've stole this from somebody, so thank you, whoever you are. But a good SRE is somebody that really gets really mad really easily about doing the same thing over and over again, right? Somebody that gets so frustrated about having to redo a bunch of manual steps every time they want to do a release or anything like that, or somebody that gets really just does not like toil. This is not like that. And that's like a really good candidate. Someone that's always trying to like find a way to automate it away. I've seen that in some of the SRE content out there. It's like automate your job away, right? Someone that wants to do that, someone that has a passion to automate their job away.
Yeah.
Because culture and behavior really is what is important, right? So those are some of the immediate things that I look for. Is do they have that desire to like they get frustrated doing the same thing over and over again, and then I think when we get into like the technical side of it, is somebody that does have a breadth of experience in like owning their system, right? You could be a software developer that understood how their system worked and monitored their system and fixed problems in their system and knew how their code got deployed and was part of the pipeline build. Like someone like that's a really good makeup of a person, or someone that was working in operations that knew how to successfully manage a incident bridge, or when an incident comes up, how do I take control of the incident, get the right people into the conversation, triage and focus how to remediate as quickly as possible during the incident, and then after the fact build a lasting solution to fix the problem, not just a patch. So people with experience in either of those are valuable. And we talked about the tools and stuff like that. So it's good to say, yeah, I know how to use Prometheus and Grafana and build dashboards and do that kind of stuff. I know how that works. Those are good things to look for in candidates, but I think it's secondary to the behavior and the mindset. It's a mindset, it's culture, it's how things get prioritized. It's somebody that's willing to say in the stand-up, like, our error budget is exhausted, guys and girls. We need to fix these problems. Like, our release process takes us 4 hours to put a release together. Like, we need to stop this. Like, that's the person you want. That's the person that you want there to say, hey, whoa, enough. Someone vocal that can command that behavior.
Oh, thank you. That was super useful. And when I was having this conversation with Chris, and he stressed about automation as well. So I think automation is everywhere, right? In whichever field you go, whether it is security, cloud security, or DevOps, or any other role these days, without automation, I think there is no role existing, I believe, in IT going forward.
I agree. Yeah, that's spot on. The automation, like, what if you automated away? Like, when you're interviewing and for your audience, talk about that stuff in your interview. Like, tell interviewer, like, hey, yeah, like, we had this thing and we automated it away. Like, that's the stuff you put on your resume.
Exactly.
That's really important if you want to be, dubbed an SRE, right, as the title is given. But and I even think, if any of your audiences and viewers are looking for just a software development role, just a normal software development role, but you know this stuff, you know how to monitor, and you know how to observe your platform, like, that's an add-on, that's a bonus, right?
Right.
Like, traditionally when you're hiring for software developers, it's like, okay, they know coding patterns, they know like what microservice architecture looks like, they know all those things, but like, do they know how to like own their code, like we talked about earlier, own their product, own the pipeline that's deploying their code? Yeah, that's the advantage. That's really cool. That's something that you can use to your advantage if you're a software developer out there and you know this stuff. You come with that knowledge.
Thank you, Troy. Yeah, I mean, for software developers as well, but I think they need to have that mindset as well, right? Like the incident management mindset, or like you said, most of them would love to code and would love to use algorithms and write the logics and stuff, but end of the day, nobody likes to own it. That's the main mindset change.
yeah, that's the thing. You got to own what you do, right? I mean, that's more of a life lesson, I guess, but that's for another day. But yeah, there's a lot of cool like things that you can apply, and own it. And you said, like, you got me thinking when you said algorithms and things like that, and it's like, simplification is like a huge part of all of this. It's like making our system simple, easy, quick, ephemeral, pets or cattle versus pets, that whole conversation there.
Yeah.
Like that's what this is really about. And I think what we can all do a little bit of is when we hear, oh, we're gonna use machine learning and AI, and we're gonna like do some crazy thing where we're gonna correlate all of our incident or alerts and our stuff like this. Like that is definitely a space that's evolving and very valuable. But it's like, do you have the fundamentals in place? Do you get 10,000 alerts a week and you don't look at any of them? Like fix that problem. Fix that problem first. It's the cart before the horse or whatever those analogies are that are out there. But you got to prioritize the fundamentals before you embark on the advanced, right? Chaos engineering is something that I think can be, and I talked about this at the Enterprise Summit earlier last year, and that can be a good place to like start. And I know a lot of people think of it as like, whoa, that's like a later thing, like that. Troy, what are you saying? That's a later thing. I think the exploratory part of chaos engineering, I don't expect you to like go to production immediately and like start throttling some of your traffic to make sure it's behaving right. I don't expect that out of the gate, but chaos engineering can mean exploration. Like I assert that my application will do this when it's under this condition. Like try it in a development environment and test your code practically. I think that's a big part of it too. Like there's a lot of things you can inch your way into without needing machine learning, right? That's like the last thing we do, right? The first thing we do is the simples, the fundamentals. So you got me all charged up when you said algorithm, and I just lost my mind. Yeah. So no, but that's good.
Thank you, Troy, for answering all the questions, and it was super useful, at least for me. And I hope that everybody who is watching this would find it super helpful as well, for people who are not only getting into SRE but to understand how does it work really in SRE, because I have never worked on it, and I'm sure you are one of the rare people, like I've said, who have actually seen it and who is currently working on it. Thanks again for joining me on this, Troy, and hopefully we'll have more fun conversations on this in future as SRE grows. I'm sure it'll grow. Do you have any?
I'd love to be back. Yeah, thank you so much. And anybody that's watching, feel free to reach out to me if you ever want to talk more about this stuff.
That's awesome.
I love it. So
thanks, Troy.
Alrighty, have a good one.